Hey guys, it's Mrs. Schacht here, and I'm here to discuss the American Homefront during World War II. I'm particularly going to mention the mobilization of our economy, the role of women, and the development of the atomic bomb. You're also going to hear some similarities and differences between the Homefront during World War I as well as World War II. So, the number one thing that we have to do as a nation right after the attack on Pearl Harbor is mobilize our economy so that we are war ready. This means we have to shift factory production from civilian products to military goods. We need to raise an army and we need to establish a workforce. And it's going to be this economic mobilization that propels us out of the Great Depression. By putting people to work and putting money back into the economy, it is going to be this that helps America get past the economic strife of the Great Depression. One organization that is instrumental in all of this is the War Production Board, created in 1942. And they did everything from creating and establishing contracts with businesses to create military products. They encouraged Americans to essentially save scarce materials and donate them. So you can see from these images, things like copper, brass, bronze, and tin were all considered scarce materials. And they encouraged businesses to convert to wartime production. So, for example, Ford and General Motors, excuse me, shifted from making cars to making tanks. On top of that, I'm just going to actually go back a slide. There was a gentleman out in California named Henry J. Kaiser who was instrumental in building roads, and he shifted from that to building the famous Liberty ship that you see here. And again, just another example of wartime production. So whereas many government organizations were created to mobilize our economy during World War I, we saw those same types of organizations created during World War II as well. How did the government pay for all of this, right? We're coming off of pretty significant economic depression, so where does this money come from? Well, one of the ways that Americans could actually contribute and help pay to finance the war was by buying a war bond. And it's essentially a certificate that you buy, whether that certificate was $10, $25, $1,000. And the money that you use to purchase the war bond, the government then used to help finance the war. Those war bonds were set to mature, meaning they accrued a small interest over the years, and basically 10, 15, 20 years down the road, you could cash that in. Over 85 million war bonds were purchased, which equated to about $135 billion. And believe it or not, there are still some people who have yet to cash in their war bonds from World War II today. This is also something that did take place during World War I. And again, another similarity between the two. Another similarity between the two home fronts was the propaganda that was created. So the Office of War Information was instrumental in creating propaganda, whether it was posters, video reels, etc., to help Americans, again, be a part of the war effort, whether that was encouraging Americans to conserve resources, as you guys can see here, or perhaps carpool to save gasoline. Again, the message is that by doing so, you're helping our soldiers. By not doing so, you're helping our enemy. And most of the coverage of war updates that came out of this office was oftentimes very cheerful and had a very patriotic tone. Americans were also encouraged to produce their own gardens and grow their own foods, and these were referred to as victory gardens. And ultimately, it's estimated that over 20 million Americans did create victory gardens during this time. Another way that Americans could help the war effort was through rationing. So there were a lot of materials that were considered scarce, whether it was meat, milk, sugar, copper, tin, you name it. And so essentially Americans would get like a coupon book, as you guys can see here, and they were limited to the amount of these scarce foods and materials that they could buy. And so by purchasing a rationing book, or by being given a rationing book and then limiting the amount of, perhaps meat American families purchased, they would feel like they were a part of the war effort and again participating to help America in general. Essentially, just like World War I, many women entered the workforce during World War II as well. And if you guys take a look at this lovely lady here in the center, this is Rosie the Riveter, who essentially became kind of the beacon and symbol of the women's workforce during World War II. And women were encouraged, as you guys can see here by all of these posters, to take factory type of jobs while men were off fighting the war. 36% of the labor force by 1945 consisted of women, and it is estimated that over 6 million women entered the workforce during the war. However, after the war, women were encouraged to return back to the home, and you're going to see in future chapters how many women do take on the role of the homemaker and create and begin families in the 1950s. But like I said, over 6 million women participated in the war effort. And the icon of that, of course, is Rosie the Riveter. Another thing to mention was the creation of war towns. So what does that mean? Well, during World War II, you saw, excuse me, a lot of migration throughout the United States. And it is estimated that approximately 15 million Americans changed residences during this time, whether that was families moving to military bases or families moving to jobs that were created for the war effort. You can see the various migrations taking shape. And you'll notice a lot of people moved out west. California in particular saw the biggest increase in new residents during World War II, and a lot of wartime production took place out in California. Of course, you also see the migration of African Americans from the South to the North to take factory jobs as well. But like I said, probably the biggest migration was people out to California to work jobs for the war effort. And California saw 3 million new residents during this time. Cities like New York, Chicago, Detroit, various cities in Ohio also saw increases because there were so many industrial jobs as well. So again, lots of movement within the United States to go work jobs for the war effort. And the final thing to discuss, which may not seem like it's related, but very important nonetheless, was the Manhattan Project. So the Manhattan Project was the top secret project to develop a nuclear weapon, and it was first commissioned in 1942. It was so top secret that members of Congress, high-ranking cabinet officials had no knowledge of this. When FDR passed away in 1945 and his vice president, Harry Truman, took office, he was first notified of the Manhattan Project after becoming president. So even the sitting vice president of the United States had no knowledge of the Manhattan Project. But as you can see, there were multiple sites across the nation, and each site contributed to the development of the atomic bomb. One of the local, as you can see here, local locations was at the University of Chicago. Due to knowledge from, renowned scientists like Albert Einstein, the Manhattan Project, like I said, was commissioned. Over $2 billion was spent on the development of the atomic bomb, and the Manhattan Project employed approximately 120,000 people. These are all, again, top secret locations. if you worked on the Manhattan Project, chances were you didn't tell anyone that that was your real job. And there were 37 sites across 19 states. Now, the first official test took place on July 16th, 1945 in Los Alamos, New Mexico. By the way, this is J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was one of the top commissioners of the Manhattan Project. And as we know, after that successful test, Harry Truman is notified, and eventually in August of 1945, the United States will drop not one, but two atomic bombs on Japan, one over the city of Hiroshima and one over the city of Nagasaki. And you guys are going to hear more about that in future videos on the war in the Pacific. So hope that helps give you guys a sense of how, people at home were able to contribute to the war effort, and hope you guys have a great day.